right. So today we have Baron Bircher, author of The Reckoning here. I recently did a review for his book, and it was absolutely fabulous. So first of all, thank you, Baron, for coming on the show with us.
Thank you for having me. What a privilege.
Well, absolutely. You're our first author interview, so we're really excited and a little bit nervous to have you. Yeah. So if I stutter that.
Well, please don't be. And it is I who am honored to be here.
Thank you, sir. I first heard about your novel when I was on a panel with James Latoile at Killer Nashville. Latoile, yes. He said your book was the best example of character development he'd ever seen. And so I was really excited to get that advanced copy of it and get to read it. And I have to say, I completely agree with Jim. So we have some writers who follow this blog. What advice could you give authors when it comes to developing a character?
Wow. I'm such a bad advice giver because I don't really ever know what's going to be valuable or what's going to resonate. What I can say is use your instincts as you already have. If you're a writer, it means you're a reader. And you've read a lot of things and you have assimilated a lot of information and you know what you like and you know what works when you're reading. And emulate and amplify that in the things that you find that work with other authors. And then try to be honest with yourself when it comes time for editing, self-editing, that every once in a while, what happens with me anyway is as I'm reading my third draft or my fourth draft, I've read it. First of all, I wrote it, or you've already written it 3 or 4 times. You've read it 5 or 6 times, and it's easy to start skipping things or to move your eyes past things because I know what I was trying to say. That doesn't mean that that's always what you did say. So I think that, when you're developing your characters, just remember that sometimes what's in your head might not have gotten onto the page. And just make sure that it did. That's all. That's easier said than done. But just as you're editing, make sure that what you think you did, you did.
Very good. I actually read all of everything I write out loud to my husband. So wow,
that's brave.
Yes. Well, he's nice enough, I guess. But he a lot of times will tell me, like, this didn't make sense. Why did you say this? And I say, oh, well, because I meant to say something else. So that has helped me, I think. We'll see.
That is helpful, I think.
So let's talk a bit about Ty Dawson. So I grew up around horses and cowboys, and I would characterize Sheriff Dawson as like the Louis L'Amour type hero. How did you come up with a character like this, especially in a more modern, like I know it's still early 70s, but more modern than the cowboy narrative setting?
I will try to keep this as brief as I can because it's very close to home for me. Ty Dawson showed up accidentally in my world. I had already done a series and a couple of standalones of something else entirely. And at the time I had lived in Hawaii, had been living in Hawaii for about 15 years, was writing a contemporary PI series and was, just involved in a different headspace. I was born and raised in Southern California back in the long time ago. And back then, it was very rural where I lived. And we were surrounded by cattle ranches and a lot of agricultural uses. And we had a small ranch raised on horses and all of that stuff, which was just fantastic. It was I loved every minute of it. And I was saddling my own horse by the time I was 10 or 11 years old. It was just the way, so were all of my friends and all of our neighbors too. It's just that's how it was. a few years ago, we all found out that my father was terminally ill, and which was all fine. He was prepared. We were prepared. We had a lot of runway, so to speak, so that we all had plenty of time to be together and to talk. And one of the things that really struck me was the 1970s, when I grew up, were a very tumultuous time in American history. And I asked my dad, how did you navigate that with 3 teenagers? I was the youngest. My eldest brother was about ready to graduate high school and be eligible for the draft for Vietnam. My sister was a cheerleader and popular and cute, about a year younger than he. I am many years younger than both of them, so I was just watching this whole thing, trying to make sure not to step in the same piles that they stepped in to make my parents angry. But the 70s were a very odd, turns out, confusing time. And I grew up watching the news programs where there were body counts. And there was film of young people on stretchers being put in helicopters and stuff. Well, I'm 10 or 11 or 12 years old, and I don't know that that's not weird. That was just what the news looked like. So I got to spend some time talking to my dad. And it was very instructive. And Ty Dawson came out of that. And, excuse me. When I write Ty, it's hanging out with my dad.
That's awesome. And I definitely get what you mean. We're probably about the same age. And I remember sitting around the dining room table at night watching Walter Cronkite and, seeing all of the Vietnam stuff. And, he always ended his show with, and that's the way it is on whatever date it might have been.
Right.
So, I remember that. It was very, I think I was in like elementary, junior high school and everything. So I get that. Yeah. About that same age.
Yeah, it was an odd time to sort of assimilate as a young person. But then as I was thinking about raising kids, now that I've raised my own, I thought, oh my God, that had to be horrifying. Yeah, here are these people that are expecting to be parents in a world that they grew up in, like the Eisenhower era, and things are very just ordinary and predictable. And this was anything but. And everything that happened every day was some brand new unpleasant surprise. And then you had drugs, and you had just politics and everything else going on. So anyway, it made for some very interesting conversations. As you point out, sounds like it's familiar territory for you too.
It is. And now I haven't read the book yet, so I intend to read it.
Shame on you.
Shame on me, I know. Well, she had the book and wouldn't share it with me. She had to finish it. So, but she promises that she'll give it to me. So, but just thinking about that, I look forward to reading it because I look forward to reading something that's set in a time period in which I grew up.
Thank you, and I was teasing you, of course.
I know you were.
But I will say, my probably the person I was closest to in my life growing up was my grandfather, who, like your dad, he was raising kids around that time, and I think that's why Ty Dawson resonated with me so much, is because he reminded me of my grandfather, who unfortunately has passed recently. But there was like moments where like you said, writing him is like talking to your dad. Reading him was like talking to my grandfather. So,
that's very touching. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
I really, really appreciated this book. Yes, thank you.
We're all getting.
Well, it's funny. That's a grand compliment, and I have to say that while that was the genesis of the character, I did not set about to write a biography of my dad, which with Ty Dawson is not him. But my dad wasn't in the law enforcement business or any of that stuff. But he did bring a mindset and a sort of worldview to the world that I grew up in that was kind of unique, because I had a lot of friends during that period of time that kind of jumped the rails, and their lives got very complicated and very difficult and very challenging because they didn't necessarily have guidance that that I had that was as precise as it was.
Yeah, definitely.
So the mystery at the center of your novel, like, it had me completely stumped, and I read a lot of mysteries, so that's an impressive feat. There's so many facets and characters at play here, but how did you go about constructing this tale? Did you know the outcome from the beginning, or did you surprise yourself? I know some of it's mysteries, so.
Well, I really am what fascinates me both as a writer and a reader is what I call a nested narrative. And I always like to have 2 or 3 stories going on at one time. And these aren't, I hopefully stay away from the typical ABC kind of story where they are too terribly predictable. And as you alluded to here, I would like for my reader for about the first 50 pages to be scratching their head saying, what is happening here? Because I do like to just parachute in to the story. And I asked my readers to just trust me. I'll bring you home. I promise I will bring you home. But I'm gonna take you on a little story ride, and there might be 2 or 3 things going on that don't seem to make sense, but they will, I promise. And that's what I call the nested narrative. And hopefully, and this isn't the first time I've done that. It's kind of a trademark of just what I do. I think I can. I don't think I could not do it. It's just the way I think about stories, and just how to weave them together. And what ends up happening is, the characters end up being far more interconnected than you would think, just as humans in real life are. We are often more connected than we think. And hopefully Reckoning does that, because there's 2 or 3 stories going on that are, at the end, quite connected.
And those connections were wild, Becky. Read it.
Yeah,
So one of the ideas the novel deals with is governmental overreach and corruption. Basically, the government is trying to take a man's private property. Did you study any real-life cases for the book? What was the research process like?
Definitely. I try to stay within historical limits or, reality limits in all my stories, only because I don't like it when, I'll use the term guardrails. I don't like it when other authors that I may read will sort of jump the tracks and really make me extend my reality horizons. I like things to stay within normal limits, or at least familiar limits, so that I know that the people, the characters in the book, are normal characters. These are real people. If it starts getting a little too jacked up, then it can get cartoony. And I definitely don't want to wander into that kind of a territory. So all 3 of the stories that make up Reckoning are all based in various levels of historical reality. The rancher story being no different, although it is a little bit anachronistic in that the rancher story is one that actually happened more recently. And you may recall there was a story that took place in a place called the the Malheur Wilderness, I think is what they call it. It's in northeastern Oregon. This happened back in the early, I want to say like 2010, 2012, somewhere in there. And it really got very, very complicated between the federal government and some people that were ranchers that were maybe being a little more aggressive than they should have been. It really turned into pardon the expression, it turned into a little bit of a shit show. And I took a lot of interest in that whole story, and I followed it in real time back then. And it just, I don't know, just kind of stuck. Now, while I didn't use that as a historical blueprint for reckoning, it was sort of the launching place for me, because I saw it happen, and I saw that the government can overreach its limits. The government can do some of the things that you think it can't. And I think that we as people in general, not just the government, but just people in general, will do as much as we'll get away with. And if you let me get away with it, I'll keep doing it. And it'll keep getting worse. And in this particular case, in this particular story, that's kind of how that starts is, well, let's just see how much this guy will put up with.
Yeah. I know there was one point in the story that I almost threw my phone, and you know which part I'm talking about, with like the one twist. They're watching it on television. This is all I'm going to say because I'm not going to ruin the twist, but I was just like, what? It was.
Yeah, don't
spoil thanks for almost breaking my phone.
Want to hear something interesting about that thing that we will not mention? That is historically accurate. That happened.
Really?
Wow.
The part that made you want to throw your phone is one of the parts that made me want to throw my phone in real time. And I thought, oh no, I got to write about that.
Wow.
How about that? Didn't we just do a great cliffhanger right there? So there you go. So you're going to buy the book now.
Like one of our questions, what would you tell someone that hasn't read the book, but you want them to read the book? You tell them, hey, it made me want to throw my phone against the wall. And, you know, it's a true life situation. So definitely. I mean, yeah, I want the book tonight, before you.
Okay.
If I had known that you were going to be a poor sharer, I would have sent two.
We generally share, but sometimes we like the same things. But luckily we just live next door to each other, so it's not too far to walk.
Well, see, okay, I feel a little less bad.
So let's see. This novel is set in the early 1970s. What was your reasoning for setting it in the past? I know this is part of a series, and I feel like we've already kind of answered this. Yeah, but can we speak further on this?
Yeah, actually, there are deeper reasons than just me exploring my own childhood. It was driven by the thing that we already spoke about, and it was driven by the fact that I became more and more interested in the history of the world that I grew up in, because I was experiencing it as a 10 or 12-year-old. Now that I'm a umpteen-year-old, I realized that there were many, many complicating factors that I hadn't the faintest idea about. So as I researched the book that took place in a place that I thought was very familiar to me, in a time frame that was familiar to me, there were many aspects of it that I didn't really have any need to know. I was 12. Okay. But now, in researching the history and the whys and the wherefores of what was going on and the politics and what have you, I found it fascinating. And then I really felt a lot of empathy for my parents, because holy cow, how did you wouldn't have had any way to see this coming. And here you got to navigate all this junk, as well as just teenagers being teenagers and us, just being a pain in the butt. So, wow, I learned a whole lot about it. Here's, as an author, the answer to your question is I love writing in the non-current period of time because I don't have to deal with the internet or CSI or DNA or cell phones or any of that crud. Everything is interpersonal. It's interhuman. And what I wanted the Dawson books to be about is about people, not about technology. And as a function of when it takes place, it is about people because that's what it used to be. And increasingly, I think if we really want to think about it skeptically, maybe, our contemporary lives are driven day to day by a lot of technology and way too much information and way too much misinformation. And how are you supposed to sift it and all this stuff? I don't have the tools for all of that. None of us do. We haven't. This is all new. We're all figuring it out as we go. And I love going back to the 70s when I go to work to write these books and not have to think about it.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Thank God there were not cell phones when I was growing up. You know, I mean, I feel so sorry for our children today because everything they do follows them. They can't make mistakes and learn from them because the mistake follows them everywhere they go.
It's a digital tattoo for the rest of your life, right?
See, so, you know.
I mean, I try to lose my phone as often as possible, but I realize that makes me weird.
But they're a necessary evil, you know. I mean, if you can't do what we do as writers and be a Luddite,
we wouldn't be interviewing you right now without this technology. So,
how ironic.
That's right. So I noticed in your bio that you wrote music for several years. How has writing music translated to writing fiction? Do you feel that it's helped you become a better writer, and how so?
I think it's made me the writer that I am. I don't know if that's better or worse or whatever, but I was talking to a buddy of mine the other day, another author. Want me to name drop because it's fun?
Yeah.
Anyway, no, I was yapping with Matt Coyle, and we talk on the phone from time to time, and just usually not about writing, but I happened to be talking to him about that. And one of the things that for me, because I came up in music, I believe there's a rhythm to the way that we can speak and the way that we can write and communicate. And sometimes it comes off clunky. Mm-hmm. Other times, if you rearrange the exact same words, they aren't clunky anymore. Now they're smooth and they're kind of pretty. Sometimes it's, well, that word's not exactly what I mean. It's just the one word. And then when you find the exact word that you did mean, oh, there, now fixed, problem solved. And there's a kind of poetry that's just inherent in that practice. And that when we get tired and at the end of a writing day, where you just want to get the idea on a page, you come back to it to edit it the next day, or at least that's what I do. And I'll look at it and I'll think, oh boy, that was, holy cow, we really need to sand that down. But sometimes these ideas, they're a nail sticking up out of a wooden floor. And you just hammer that thing down and now everything's smooth again. But you have to identify them. And I think music helped me do that.
I would say so. I think in my review, I mentioned that your writing is lyrical often.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
maybe you said
and
that, yes.
That was one thing. Like, obviously, the first thing I fell in love with was Ty Dawson. But after that, the lyrical writing, it was just absolutely beautiful. So when I read your bio, I was like, oh, no, that makes sense. He wrote music.
Well, thank you. That again, that's a beautiful compliment to me because I that's how I want it to be. I want it to be. Here's another goofy thing to say, and I'm going to go ahead and say it anyway. I view each one of these books when I sit down to write, I view them as an album. I want them to be a self-contained unit. I want them to have a title and an image and a feeling. And I want chapter 1 through chapter whatever to flow together just like a seamless album would, where the segues work and the music works and the lyrics work with the sonic qualities and all of that junk that sounds so hippy dippy. But I really begin with that intention, and each book is hopefully slightly different because of that. I don't want everything to sound the same, but I do approach them similarly when I start to work.
Which kind of plays into the next question. So you mentioned the book is an album, but you also have playlists for your book. Do you have a preferred band or album you listen to as you write?
You dropped out a little bit there. I didn't hear the question completely.
Right. Do
I do what?
A preferred band or album that you listen to as you write?
That's an interesting question. No, what I do have is I know the timeline that I'm going to be writing in. For example, in Reckoning, I know that it's going to be in 1975 or 6, and so I know because I was there. I remember what I was listening to. I remember the music and what felt important at the time and what felt incidental at the time. So I remember that, viscerally. On the other hand, it also informs how we were all kind of feeling at the time. And if I can listen to that music while I'm writing, not necessarily literally physically writing, that I do in silence, but I do make a playlist beforehand. I know what my story is going to be beforehand. I know what the title of the book's going to be beforehand. So I'm writing this album with a destination in mind, and that playlist is something that I create in advance. And my poor wife has to listen because it's all I will listen to during the 5 or 6 months it takes to write the book. So when I finish my work day, I'll come back into the kitchen, and that's, if there's going to be music, that's the music we're going to listen to. And fortunately, we're of a similar age, so it's all familiar territory for her too. But it's again, I used the word guardrails before. It's part of the sonic guardrails, I guess I use when I'm writing these books, just to keep them real, to keep them anachronistically accurate.
Right. That's very cool. Mm-hmm. So the last question we've already touched on once, but what is something you'd like people who haven't read your book to know? What's something you'd like Becky to know about your book?
What would I like you to know? You know what? Everything we've already talked about is, I think that the real answer to your question is, I would like for my readers to kind of know me. And I would like for my readers to feel like they know me better after they've read one of my books. And if I've done that successfully, the biggest compliment would be, well, I'd like to read another one. And to know me better every time. If I have done what I want to do as an artist, I want to reveal my stories, my characters, and all of that stuff. But I want to reveal it in a way that you feel connected to as a reader, because that's what I like. I'm not. This isn't some sort of weird. I don't know. So who knows how weird it is, but as a reader, it's how I like to consume the work of the authors that I like most. And I do feel when they've done it right that I know them better. And if I ever get the chance to meet them, I always think, what would I ask? Or, whatever. And I don't know that, that's that's what I would like my readers to experience. Is just I have some questions. I love to hear questions from readers. I love it. I think that's a huge compliment.
That's wonderful. Well, anything else you want to add or tell us?
I can't imagine how much more verbose could I possibly be.
What about an upcoming book or anything you're working on?
Well, there you go. Yes, exactly. How about that? Mm-hmm. Well, Reckoning just came out about, what is this? About a month ago now, almost a month ago. I'm very pleased with it. The sequel, the next one, Reckoning is number 3 in the Ty Dawson series. First one is called South California Purples.
Okay.
That's a weird title. It is named for a song.
Okay, there. It's working now.
Okay. With the question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Then I'll start with the question of telling us about, your upcoming work. And you mentioned that this was a series.
Yes.
And this is the 3rd in the series.
Reckoning is book number 3. Book number 4 is coming out early 2024. And the title of that is Knife River. It is one of only 2 that I can think of that I've ever written in my career that is not based on a song title that I'm aware of. But it has music all over it as well. In any event, what I was digressing on before we pressed record is that the song lists that I was alluding to earlier, are often, almost always, included in the acknowledgments and author notes at the end of a book. So if you really want to do the whole immersive deep dive, you can know what I was listening to when I'm writing the books.
Well, I'm sure that was my music too. But the 70s.
Well, see, I think you might be reminded of some things that you may have forgotten about.
That's right.
I do try to find the deep cuts.
Good. So my last question is: should I start with book 1 and then work my way through the series instead of starting with Reckoning?
Oh, I think series are always fun. But I don't think you have to feel obligated to do so. Exactly. And Kayla, did it stand on its own for you? Did you feel like you needed to know something?
I didn't realize it was part of a series until the end when I read the acknowledgments. But so I think that's really a great sign of fantastic writing, because I've read series in the past where it's like, no, you have to start with this book. One. But this one, I think it could stand on its own. Okay. That said, I want to go back and read the first 2. Right. And then,
I'm glad to hear that. Well, I always encourage people to do that because that's how I wrote it. It's how the story took life for me. But it doesn't mean that's how I would.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. You just very special to have you as our first author interview on A Couple of Bees Read, and we're just very excited about it.
Well, I am honored to be your first guest, and just couldn't be more happy and privileged by the kind things you said about my work. And as you know, as an author, Kayla, and Becky too, you know how that feels when somebody reads what you wrote and it resonated in some way, in almost any way that isn't bad.
That's right. Well, thank you again so much, and we hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me. I very much